Journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia killed by a car bomb in Malta. Reporter Ján Kuciak shot dead in Slovakia. Veteran crime journalist Giorgos Karaivaz assassinated outside his house in Greece. This is not happening in some shaky democracy or rundown dictatorship. This is happening in the European Union.
These assassinations, they are only the tip of the iceberg. Journalists in the European Union struggles more and more to report, to investigate.
Europe as a whole remains one of the safest places to be a journalist in the world. But that doesn't mean that things here are just fine. The risk for journalists are mounting in many EU countries. Reporters on the streets of even well-established democracies like Germany or the Netherlands risk physical attacks from members of the public, and they can be virtually under siege on social media. Many European countries do a lot to protect journalists, and most at least pay lip service to the value of free media. But in some countries, that free media is under blatant attack, and individual reporters are being threatened, and all this from EU governments.
Every day we are becoming such threats, such insults, attacks.
They try to pose us as either agents working against the people or foreign agents.
It's the politicians who have vilified our profession.
As we'll see, there are many different ways these governments attack the media. Restrictive laws, commercial takeovers, and financial regulations all have broader impact than harassing individual reporters. And yet the European Union does next to nothing. The EU institutions regulate many aspects of life for its almost 450 million inhabitants. So why cannot the EU figure out something as important as freedom of the press? In this video, we are going to have a look at repression of the media in the middle of the European Union. Why the EU cannot get its own members to stick to shared values of media freedom, and what real effects this is having on democracy. First, Hungary.
I think the European Union missed the opportunity to come in and intervene and stop.
Mihai Hordy is the head of news at Klub Radio in Budapest. The station is one of the very few remaining independent Hungarian media outlets. It's critical of Viktor Orbán's government. This year, Klub Radio was taken off air officially for regulatory offences. They still broadcast on the internet, where Hordy feels safer at the moment.
I cannot exclude anything right now, so it might even happen that they will come one day with police force and close down the building altogether, or I don't know, they will arrest the chairman or the journalists. Next year, in the spring, we will have parliamentary elections, and for them, though they own the 95%, I think, of the media landscape in Hungary, it is very important to silence all independent voices.
Hungary is a striking example of what happens when media freedom is systematically dismantled. Since coming to power in 2010, Viktor Orbán's party Fidesz has demolished media pluralism. They now control public service broadcasters and have replaced critical voices with government loyalists. State advertising contracts favor uncritical outlets, and business figures close to the party have bought up independent media. Despite public protests, analysts estimate up to 90% of the media is effectively under state control. During the coronavirus pandemic, the government has further strengthened its hold over Hungary's media. In the 2021 World Press Freedom Index of 180 countries, Hungary slipped 3 points down to 92. The worst is ranked at 180. That's not much to laugh about, but sometimes in Hungary, sarcasm on the internet is the only way to talk about serious things. Peter Oy is the founder of the independent website 444. He often faces personal attacks and allegations by the state media. He and his team produce a weekly podcast. Today they are talking about Hungary's press freedom ranking.
69. Argentina, 74. Togo, érted? Sierra Leone, 75. ott polgárháború volt tegnap.
Az egész Orbánizmusnak.
The thinking and the strategy behind Orbanism is rooted in the fact that this man is very familiar with the various weaknesses of Western-type liberal democracies. He constantly attacks them, ignoring the rules. The point is not to follow the rules, which makes it impossible for us to take him on while we continue to respect those rules.
We asked the government for their view, but the Hungarian government spokesman for international affairs declined our interview request, citing a busy schedule. His team sent us an email saying the government is committed to promote and protect the freedom of the media. It continued, if the situation in Hungary is so dire, how can the left-wing press publish fake news without consequences? But some feel the available independent media is so limited and that information is so important in a time of pandemic, they're doing it themselves. St. Endre, a small town near Budapest. A few volunteers distribute homemade bulletins with news culled from independent newspapers that many people cannot access. They say they're filling in the information gaps left by the state-controlled media.
Only 32% of the people have a good idea of how many people have died of COVID. It shows how the government is isolating people from real information.
Viktor Orban effectively destroyed independent media in Hungary, and he did it in full view, in the middle of the European Union. And what did the bloc do? It expressed heartfelt concerns. It seems Brussels has neither the tools nor the political will to do anything. And this lack of EU action has been closely watched in other EU member states, like Poland.
Right now, the Polish public radio and TV are strictly serving one party. They present only one opinion and spread the propaganda of one party.
Radio 357 in Warsaw, an independent radio station broadcasting over the internet, run by some very experienced journalists. Ernest Zozuń worked for public broadcaster Troika for more than 3 decades, until last year when he was fired. He says for opposing editorial interference in favor of the ruling party.
It was our bosses, the program directors. They would tell us what topics to cover and what topics not to cover. There was no institutional censorship, but it was our supervisors, the program directors and heads of departments, who were our censors.
Poland still has a diverse media landscape, but it seems under threat. The Law and Justice Party came to power in 2015 and has apparently taken Hungarian leader Viktor Orban's approach to the media as an example. The government has public broadcasters under its control. Many critical journalists have been fired or pushed to resign. Loyal publications receive advertising contracts from state-controlled companies. And this year the government announced a new advertising tax which could fatally cripple many small and independent media outlets. Leading independent TV stations and newspapers turned their screens and front pages black in protest. The government often speaks of renationalizing the Polish media to counter what it says is foreign interference. Last year, the state-run oil refiner PKN Orlen bought a publisher that owns 20 regional newspapers and more than 100 local weekly publications. Together, they have more than 17 million readers.
Katarzyna Pachelska was deputy editor of Dziennik Zachodni, one of the regional newspapers taken over by the state oil refiner. After 18 years in the newsroom, she resigned, like many of her colleagues. She didn't want to be told what to write, she says.
I don't think they bought the newspaper to leave everything the way it was. I think they'll want to have reports showing them in a positive light. There will be national elections in Poland in 3 years. Regional newspapers like Dziennik Zachodni are very well suited to serve as communication tools.
Czasopisma i gazety są świetnym przekaźnikiem tego typu komunikatu.
A court in Warsaw suspended the takeover for now, but PKN Orlen insists the deal was legal and will fight for it. Pachelska believes the Polish media will fight for its independence.
Press freedom is certainly key when it comes to democracy in Poland. If this freedom vanishes, that will have consequences. Consider what has already happened to our court system, to women's rights. Our freedoms are being increasingly restricted. I hope we won't end up like Hungary.
But Poland is falling dramatically in global media freedom rankings, down 46 places in the 6 years of this government. It's now at position 64. It's a collapse in international regard for Poland's media freedom, which the government dismisses as politically motivated. Paweł Jabłoński, Under-Secretary of State, said it was an unfounded attempt to discredit the government.
I'm not aware of any incident where a Polish journalist, no matter who they worked for, was not able to carry out their work. I think Poland is an example of how things should be when it comes to free media and criticism of the government. Everyone has the right to criticize, and they make use of it.
But as we've seen, Poland shows how there are ways to bend the rules and put journalists under pressure without it looking like a direct attack on media freedom. Direct attacks on individual reporters can be found not far away in another EU member state, Slovenia.
After that tweet, it was like a starting point of insulting, attacking, personal attacks on journalists in Slovenia.
Journalist Mojca Pasek was the target of a defamatory tweet from the man who is now Slovenia's prime minister. He alleged she was working as a prostitute. That was after she reported on extreme right-wing tendencies in his party. Pasek is a reporter for RTV, the country's public broadcaster that has repeatedly come under pressure from the government. Many journalists here speak of an atmosphere of fear and intimidation.
Now, for me, my experience is, in the first place, that you are a little bit depressed. And then that you think that everything is brutal because you don't know how to deal with it. But then again, we are professional journalists and we must be professionals at our work. So even if this is coming, these attacks are here, after my personal experience, I'm even in more fighting mood, even in more professional fighting mood to work, to discover the truth about what is going on.
Slovenia's right-wing populist leader Janez Janša, the man who sent that tweet attacking Pasek, is an admirer of Donald Trump and a friend of Viktor Orban. He often publicly attacks the country's main public media outlets and reporters. And it goes beyond rhetoric. His government has proposed laws which would increase its influence over public media. Fears for the future of the state-owned news agency erupted last year when its funding was temporarily halted. A threatening move during a row over accounting transparency. Meanwhile, Janša's political allies run several pro-government media outlets. In the World Press Freedom Index, Slovenia dropped 4 positions in the last year to hit position 36 in 2021. Officials blame unprofessional journalists for turmoil in the media. The Prime Minister's spokesman wouldn't answer our question.
I have just one question to you about your reaction to the allegations that are made against your Prime Minister that he's undermining press freedom in Slovenia.
No comment.
No comment.
I don't have any comment.
This summer, it's Slovenia's turn to take over the rotating presidency of the European Council, a very important role. Its responsibilities include driving forward work on issues of interest to the entire Union and has often included civil liberties, among them free speech. Yet at home, Slovenia's government seems to be developing some of the same media restrictions as Hungary and Poland, a trio of European Union member states which are contravening EU norms on media freedom and getting away with it.
I think that their ideology is very different and in a way conflicting with the standards of European Union. And since they have not seen a clear message and also clear action from European Union that this is unacceptable, that they simply go on. They behave like small children who see parents who simply don't say no.
Why won't the EU take action? We meet up with Vice President of the European Commission, Vera Jourova, to ask exactly that.
We don't have still sufficiently strong EU legislation which would protect the media. So it is not so easy to take decisive action.
And still there are reporters we talk to, for example, in Hungary, where 90% of the media is under state control and journalists, independent reporters are being demonized as haters, as traitors. So hasn't the European Commission failed the independent media in Hungary?
I told you I can take action when I have the legal ground for that. I am not an activist. The Commission is the guardian of the treaty, which has to play by the rules. And so when I don't have the EU law, which is manifestly, clearly breached at the level of the member state, I cannot launch any kind of procedure.
Members of the European Parliament say there is a tool which could exert real pressure. They point to a new mechanism connecting EU funding to the rule of law in member states.
The European Union is not a cash machine that you just simply withdraw money and you don't put anything in. And this is an important message. We are really a union of values. So who wants the money should have the values as well. Should have independent media, should have independent jurisdiction, should have freedom of civil organization, and so on and so on.
What are the chances of the EU confronting its own members to defend media freedom?
If the European Union interferes in Polish internal affairs on media freedom, the government will use it as propaganda against the European Union.
It's the European model, democracy, press freedom. It's part of our values and if we don't defend it, no one will defend it.
They certainly should do something, because otherwise European Union will become just another inefficient international organization.
The European Union was supposed to be a club of liberal democracies, a countermodel to dictatorships and authoritarian regimes elsewhere. Now it's faced with authoritarian tendencies within its own borders. It is badly equipped to fight them, but doing nothing seems like a poor option. The European Union promotes media freedom and human rights around the world. its credibility to continue that may well require action at home.